Well, now just 7 weeks until the midterm elections, we continue to debate what's being done with millions of illegals surging across the southern border. We'll talk about the latest hits and misses from the administration, and we'll deal with the death of humor in the United States. All of that, plus a special guest on this episode of Dale Carter's America.
From the heart of flyover country, he's not on the far right, and he's certainly not on the far left. Like you, he's somewhere in the middle. This is Dale Carter's America.
All right, so we are here with another episode with 7 weeks to go until the midterm elections. You will not see Kurt's face on camera today because we have a special guest. And I got to tell you, Ethan, it always does my heart good when I hear from people, I've listened to you my entire life. I mean, it never gets old. It always makes me feel like I'm young and spry.
Right.
I'm not quite Joey B yet, but I guess I'm getting there.
No, I think you got some time until you get there. A lot of time, actually.
Yeah. Ethan Allen is joining us. Now, you have a podcast, and what I'm told is that it's the younger male demo that is coming to podcasts. Would you say that's accurate?
What do you mean by demo?
Well, demographic.
Oh, yeah.
It's younger men.
I'd say absolutely. I think my generation, this age group, is just getting obviously fed up with what's going on, and there's a realization that we're the future. At some point, Mitch McConnell is going to keel over. At some point, Chuck Schumer is going to keel over. These
Chuck
people,
Grassley.
Right.
He's 90 years old.
I know. They're going to fade away at some point. And right now, younger people like the AOCs and the Ilhan Omars are the people that are stepping up. And who's going to counter them? It's going to have to be young bucks like myself. So I'd say young male Christians, even a lot of females stepping up to the plate and understanding that, somebody's going to have to take the wheel for America, and why not? That ought to be us.
All right. Well, tell me about your podcast and how folks can get it.
You can find me on Instagram, ethanallen.usa, or most exclusively where the hub of content comes from. It's going to be on YouTube, Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And the whole bulk of it is pretty much throwing my hat in the ring of political politics and putting my input out there. And, because there's just... I found myself like screaming on the phone with other people, like fighting the same fight, you know what I mean? Just venting about all this crap that's going on. And it's like, I feel like I make good points just in random conversation with people every so often. Why not try and put that out into the world to where other people can listen to that as well? So for me, I started it was at a point of I'm fed up. I have to go have another outlet besides just my family and friends.
Well, that's how the podcast began for me. I needed another outlet.
Exactly.
My show 4 hours a day on KFKF was not enough, and plus, there were people saying, don't get too political on there. So I just have fun with the show, and the more serious stuff comes over here to the podcast.
I don't think, as much as a political world we are living in, I still think there's a stigma of don't talk about the three things, religion and politics. And at this point, I'm kind of like, why? These are the two fundamental things that drive people in our country. Why do we not talk about them? It should be.
Well, so you're going to kind of read and react today as we go through this. We have a full plate.
Yep. Full plate.
Lots of stuff to talk about.
Let's hit them up.
Do you have sponsors on your podcast?
No, sir. I wish. Like I said, just started out on the YouTube, Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So go
you can get us on all of those platforms as well, and also YouTube. That's where you get the video, so you can see an old man and a young buck who is the future of this country. We do have sponsors. We got 3 of them, and we're going to start with Bob Watson. He is our State Farm agent in Blue Springs, Missouri, and I have a quick story about Bob. And this is why you want a State Farm agent. You want somebody you can call, Ethan. You don't want to just leave this to an 800 number to a gecko or some other animal. You want Bob Watson and his crew at 816-229-7878. He is in Blue Springs, Missouri, but he's licensed in Kansas and Missouri. So, I was doing this 25-city tour stop thing, for my morning show, 25 years on the morning show. Right. And I'm sitting at the Dairy Queen on North Oak Traffic Way, and I'm a little early, so I'm messing around on Facebook, and all of a sudden, boom, I get hit from behind. And I look behind me, and the guy's doing like a pirouette, and he's going to take off. Right?
Right.
And I get out of my car, and I'm like, no, citizen's arrest here. You stop, you get out of the car, and then I called Bob's office.
Off to you.
I mean, if you have one of those agencies that you don't know who your person is, who do you call?
Ghostbusters.
I called Bob. I called Bob Watson, and I think he was touring Europe or something like that. So I called the office, and I got Terry in the office, who's taken care of me for 27 years. And I said, Terry, what do I do? And she said, take a picture of his insurance card in case there's any damage. There really wasn't. He hit my car and the truck behind me, and he was going to take off.
Sometimes you just got to hit and run.
Yeah. Well, no, that would be illegal. We don't do anything illegal on this show.
That. No,
maybe sometimes immoral, but we don't do illegal
Right.
stuff.
That was metaphorically speaking.
So, Bob Watson is your guy. He's a State Farm agent, and we are going to do a live version of the podcast again on October 6th at another sponsor location, and that's coming up at Funhouse Pizza.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, Funhouse Pizza has 2 locations in town, Lee Summit, 50 Highway. We were there with the first live podcast, and it was a great hit. We had a huge crowd and all that. So we're going to my adopted hometown of Blue Springs for Funhouse Pizza on 7 Highway, and that's going to be October 6th. I know Bob Watson is going to be there. We've got some other special guests we're trying to line up, and our guy there, Jim Dingman, owns the place, and he always does something really special. He's always got like concert tickets, front row.
Something for the people.
Chiefs tickets, something like that. Jim Dingman is a great American Marine. And he loves our podcast, and so we're hoping for a big crowd. Usually we get together about 5 o'clock for this live thing, and then we'll go with an episode at 6 p.m., and we'll have some special guests and some interviews and all that. But come watch the podcast live. Now, you probably can't because you won't be in town.
No, but that doesn't mean other people shouldn't go check it out. The gang's going to all be there, it sounds like, and I'm sure it'll be quite the honky-tonk going on.
October 6th. Kurt, how are we publicizing this?
It'll be on Facebook and everything else today.
All right. So come and have some fun with us. One person who will not be there is Brian Stelter. We've made a lot of fun about Brian. We had a very emotional going-away party for Brian on the podcast.
I saw that.
And like many people on the left, he landed on his feet. It's much like throwing a cat out of a window. Not that we would suggest doing that, but you know what they say about cats. They always land on their feet.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Brian has landed on his feet, so after the cancellation of reliable sources on CNN, which were not reliable at all, he's going to Harvard to teach, you talk about the next generation, he's going to teach the next generation of journalists.
Right. Congrats to Mr. Potato Head for landing that job. But to be honest with you, talking about like, oh, he's going to Harvard, it honestly doesn't shock me, but I really don't think there'll be a lasting impact on this because anymore, let's be honest, Harvard's legitimacy and legacy has been tainted within the last decade or so. And it's only getting worse. And actually, believe it or not, as of August of this year, Harvard is in a legal battle with the Supreme Court over affirmative action. Supreme Court is telling Harvard, you can't hire people based off of their sex, whichever of the 64 they choose to be, or you can't choose somebody based off of their color. That's what the Supreme Court's telling them. And Harvard is actually putting 10 toes in the ground and saying, oh, well, if we don't have affirmative action, we're going to miss out on the potential of a lot of ethnic minorities or whatever else they'd like to categorize people. And that's the battle they're in right now, but you don't hear about that, do you? So Harvard's legacy is just tanking right now, along with anything else that goes woke. Go woke, you go broke. So Mr. Potato Head, and I say that mainly because pronouncing his last name is that's difficult. I always want to say like Stelzer, Alka-Seltzer, but
I screwed it up several times. We even made fun of it. That was the weekly promo actually from Kurt, because Kurt looks for me to make mistakes so he can put it in the promo.
I wasn't gonna say nothing. I'm right in the same boat with you, but him going to Harvard, not that big of a deal.
Okay. So we move on to the state of Illinois. They have a new list of non-detainable offenses starting in 2023. And there's been like this, what do you call this, a meme or something going around, Kurt? Is that a meme, this thing here that you're putting up?
An infographic.
An infographic. And my wife, who is more conservative than I am, her hair was on fire about this. She said,
oh, I can imagine.
Look into this, find out if this is true. So Illinois non-detainable offenses beginning January 1st, 2023. If you commit these crimes in Illinois, now there's some debate about whether there's discretion involved by the court, but beginning January 1st, 2023, aggravated battery, aggravated DUI, aggravated fleeing, arson, these are in alphabetical order, by the way, arson, burglary, drug-induced homicide, intimidation, kidnapping, robbery, second-degree murder, and threatening a public official are all non-detainable offenses starting in January.
I got to say, going off that hit list right off the bat, you hear some of those, and I think this would, something like this would be more fitting for something like a petty crime, so to speak. And I can actually speak from experience there. If somebody were to take like a rubber bar mat, so to speak, maybe about like a foot big, what they put on top of the bars. If somebody were to take something like that, I think that would maybe fall in line with no cash bond there. Spent 15 hours in county jail for that, and I was like, hey man, this doesn't seem like that big of a deal. And moving forward from that, it was just no big deal. It was disorderly conduct, and I was like, all right, cool. It wasn't even like an alcohol-related thing. It was just me being a stupid and young and dumb. But that would be something I would think would fall in line here. Disorderly conduct, no cash bond. But second-degree murder, you got arson, robbery on there.
Kidnap somebody.
Right, kidnapping or threatening a public official. That goes to show if Brett Kavanaugh lived in Illinois and that guy who showed up with a gun trying to, murk him. All right, done deal there.
And Kurt's done some research on this. I guess there's a Snopes article out of that basically says it's not true, but then contradicts itself and says it is completely true. But the thing that got to me out of the Illinois Safety Act is what they're calling it. Democrats who were asked about this, who are in congressional races, say crime isn't moving any needles in their campaigns. They're not scared of the crime wave that's going through major cities. And, once again, Democrats in places like Kansas City, Emmanuel Cleaver, he's going to walk back to Congress because they're just going to go in, they're going to pull the lever for the Democrat.
Right. And talking about crime coming back to cities, I speaking from experience, I know all of us here, Westport has not been this bad. I feel like I've never seen Westport this bad, and even coming back into town when I found out, hey, we're going to Westport, I was like, oh man, it's pretty bad down there.
Did Kurt show you the bullet holes here in the palatial Steel City studios?
No,
since we've been here.
They fixed them, didn't they?
Oh no, there's one in the conference room that faces Mill Street.
Oh,
that's still there.
Okay,
yeah, and
that'll be the tour after the podcast.
And they keep shooting out the windows, and they only shoot out the KFKF logo. The other three stations,
it's probably Country Legends 104.69 coming after y'all.
You think so?
Maybe a competition. Who knows?
Well, and I walked in on a burglary here once at like 3 in the morning. Yeah. So, we got a little problem here in Westport, but that's okay because, the Pharaoh himself, His Highness, is taking care of all this.
Right.
Quentin Lucas I of Kansas City.
Coming from, I want to say, Dale, you're coming from a real big place of privilege right now. I mean, look at you, a white man, you have a steady job, and you want to talk about people stealing your things. You're coming from a place of privilege. I think you need to
they weren't my
yourself.
things. They were Steel City's things.
Yeah.
They didn't go in my office.
Justifying it. We're justifying it.
I don't care anymore. That's fine. All right. We move on. Where are we moving on to? Oh, the pandemic is over, right? According to Joe Biden. We'll have more from his 60 Minutes interview with Scott Pelley, which was just a tongue bath, if you've ever seen one, of a public official. But according to the President of the United States, the pandemic, COVID, is over. Roll the clip.
Mr. President, first Detroit Auto Show in 3 years.
Yeah.
Is the pandemic over?
The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over. If you notice, no one's wearing masks. Everybody seems to be in pretty good shape. And so I think it's changing, and I think this is a perfect example of it.
Yeah, so he's walking through the auto show with Scott Pelley. Now, first of all, somebody at the White House, just about had an aneurysm over this because they couldn't wait to get to the podium and say what the president really meant, right? Is that our COVID policy is still intact. And here's the reason for that. I want you to think about something here. Because when the president forgave student loans, and I'm not sure where that is right now, but that's definitely going to be tested in the courts. He based it on a law that came out of 9/11 that allows the president to do this, to forgive lots of loans, to forgive car loans in a state of national emergency, and they put it under the COVID umbrella. So if the president goes on national television and tells you that COVID is over, which is what he did on CBS, he's basically saying, I just committed an illegal act by forgiving all these loans.
Right. Which, I mean, to be this whole setting up the stage, it doesn't surprise me, everything that he said on 60 Minutes. I mean, Joe is so far gone. They told him he was going to be on 60 Minutes, and he probably asked how long the interview was going to be. So, like, with the student loan forgiveness, I mean, I didn't go to college personally. I didn't get to see any of that. I don't know how that process is going, but I know how frustrating it's got to be for somebody like yourself that did go to college, and I'm sure that's paid off. I hope it's paid off by now.
Yeah.
And frustrating to people like me where it's like, I didn't even go to college. I picked a different path of life, so why should I have to bear the sins of somebody else's poorly made decision?
I wish I'd known. I wouldn't have paid it off. And I'm holding out for mortgage forgiveness is what I'm holding out for.
Yeah.
Because that's the last loan I have is the last 9 years on my house.
Or gas money forgiveness. That's one thing I like to, when I find out somebody's a Biden supporter, I always like to tell them, hey, would you like to follow me to the gas pump? You can fill my tank. This is
well, we've got more on Biden later, because what we normally do is we blitz through the news headlines of the day, and then we get to the deeper dive stuff. So Joey B is coming back. Pat Sajak is in trouble. He had a photo emerge with Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, and boy, the cancel culture is going crazy over this one. Do you know anything about her?
I have seen her speak. I have seen her speak at events, and I will say, when it comes to individuals in Congress that are aligned with, our train of thought, to me, not that I don't pay attention to them because it's just like I don't care, but part of me is kind of along the thought of, I understand the bulk of what they stand for. I don't feel like I have to worry about them as much, and that's not the best approach to take on things. I will admit that, you know what I mean? But with everything else that's going on, I don't feel like I have to worry so much about Major Taylor Greene versus, the AOCs or the Bidens, what's going on, the
Let's
Pelosi's.
flip the script on it. Let's flip the script. If you saw Pat Sajak photographed with AOC or Bernie Sanders, would your hair be on fire?
No, I honestly would not think anything of it. It's just, okay.
Yeah.
He is what, Wheel of Fortune?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Cancel culture's like, we got to get him off there because he's with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene.
I don't care. Care.
And we're going to get into this a little bit more, but this whole cancel culture and all this other crap, it's
killing everything.
It's killing everything.
It seeps into everything that was once good, valuable, holy, and it just corrupts it and tears it apart until you're at a breaking point, which we're going to get into later in this when it reaches down to your kids.
The death of humor.
Yes, and the death of humor. Plenty of comedians have come out, even somebody like Jerry Seinfeld. Yeah, people that are of leftist leniency are even coming out and saying cancel culture is killing comedy.
Yeah, it is. Okay, Banned Books Week. Let's move on to that. How do we square the First Amendment with protecting children? Kurt just put up this is why you need to get it on YouTube so you can actually see the video of what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
This is a book that was available to elementary school kids. And
I'm only going to leave it on screen for a second because it's just too much.
It's disgusting. It shows I'm assuming a boy performing oral sex on a man. I don't know how much.
It's stuff like this where it's just like it boils your blood because I feel like everybody is on the same page that you draw the line with kids. You don't go after kids. If you go to, it's even common knowledge like going to prison or stuff like that. Prison inmates, people that have committed heinous crimes, murder, serial killers, do not mess with child molesters. The line is drawn there. And when it comes to if you cannot expose yourself in public, if you cannot expose yourself to the outdoor world and outside of a public school, why all of a sudden is it different? Oh, if you illustrate it onto a page and put it in a book and slap a PG sticker on it. It's the same thing. It doesn't change. Yeah. So it's disgusting and it's degeneracy. Downright degeneracy. Anybody advocating for that, saying it's progressive to any degree.
That's what Vice President Kamala Harris, who, by the way, I have stated on this podcast, and I believe it's true, she is the stupidest person to ever be Vice President of the United States. She lets Dan Quayle off the hook. I mean, and I thought he was pretty much an airhead when he was Vice President.
Right.
But she is completely stupid. And, they ask her, are there examples of books that you would want to ban from elementary school kids? And she said no. That, the First Amendment is all about everybody having access to everything. Right. So, and she's a parent too, I believe.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want my granddaughter to see that.
God, no.
She's 8 years old.
Exactly. Any anybody under the age of 18.
Yeah.
That's pretty much pornography. You're justifying pornography to children for some means of your crazy ideations of progress.
I can't remember the Supreme Court justice who said it, but he said, I can't really put my finger on what pornography is, but I know it when I see it.
Yes.
And what we're seeing on that screen right now, if you're watching it on YouTube, is definitely pornography.
Absolutely.
All right. Enough Republican senators now on board to spend another $12 billion that we don't have on the Ukraine. Congress has to pass a continuing resolution, a CR, because we still don't have a budget, by next Friday to keep the government operating. You got to get more toner ink to print more dollars so that we can keep the government open. But we have a kind of a theory on our podcast, I don't know how you feel about it, that Democrats are running this country to the cliff at light speed. Mm-hmm. Republicans are running this country to the cliff at the speed limit. I mean, the destination is the same. And when you've got enough Republican senators who basically say, let's spend another $12 billion in the Ukraine, what the hell? I mean, it's monopoly money.
Right. And at this point, you can't look at what's going on and say that, they're trying to do the right thing. In their mind, they're doing the right thing, and it's just coming off badly. At this point, it is evident as it's as evident as it is the nose on your face. Gosh, got to stutter through that. But that this is purpose. This is on purpose.
Yeah.
There is intent to do what they're doing. In Alabama, people are pouring out black water from their taps. But
Mississippi. Let's don't throw Alabama
Mississippi,
under the bus.
Okay, all right. I knew it was one of those southern
I think the water's clean in Alabama.
It's very fitting. No, anyways, back on track here. Gosh, I'm going at the cliff at lightning speed. But there is intent here, because if you look at your own country, everything that's going on here, that we just, as far as I know, we still could be in a baby formula shortage. But let's not take care of our own youth. Let's go send that money over to Ukraine so they can watch out for their prosperity. And it's so obvious that it's like, all right, their American interests, they are non-existent. They have none.
Yeah. Well, so we're going to send $12 billion more dollars over to them.
Fantastic.
All right. So we move on to what we call one of the deeper dive segments here, what to do with millions of illegals who are flooding this country. I saw a story on The Wire that even U.S. Customs and Border Protection, which is part of the Biden administration, says 2.1 million illegals have come across the border since for the fiscal year, and it is an all-time record, so they are here. So what do we do with them? DeSantis and Abbott, they continue to share the pain with sanctuary cities and the vice president, who assured us yesterday that the border was secure.
Right. Has told us that from day one.
Yeah.
And as things have progressively gotten worse, towards the cliff, as you said.
Yeah. And now it's interesting because I guess it just depends on who does it, right? If Biden in the middle of the night takes jet loads of illegals and sends them into the interior of the country,
right.
Well, that's fine.
Right.
So in the light of day, DeSantis and Abbott, they're sending illegals. Abbott continues to send them to Chicago, and Lori Lightfoot is turning them right around on buses.
Beetlejuice. Good old Beetlejuice.
Oh, she's something else. Sending them out to the suburbs. And then, of course, Ron DeSantis from Florida has made headlines by sending them to Martha's Vineyard.
Oh, yes, quite.
Martha's Vineyard.
Quite.
The
Indeed.
liberal enclave. And what you're seeing on screen there is AOC's reaction to the invasion at Martha's. Because they sent 50. 2.1 million have come across the border. They sent 50 to Martha's Vineyard.
It's a grain of sand in the Sahara.
Yeah. And how are they dealing with that on Martha's Vineyard, on Martha's Vineyard? You got to say it right. Martha's Vineyard.
In less than 24 hours, all of them are gone.
Got a clip here.
So, what are the most difficult challenges right now?
The difficult challenges are we have, at some point in time, they have to move from here.
They got to get out of here.
Right, we don't have the services to take care of 50 immigrants, and we certainly don't have housing. We're in a housing crisis as we are on this island.
Martha's Vineyard.
We can't house everyone here that lives here and works here. We don't have housing for 50 more people.
By the way, this is off season for the Ritzy Ritz to go to Martha's Vineyard.
Right.
So they have like thousands of bedrooms available in Martha's Vineyard right now. So they don't have a housing crisis. They're putting them in hotels in places like Chicago.
Yep.
Why can't they live in a hotel on Martha's Vineyard?
It's it's rules for thee, not for me.
Exactly. And that hypocrisy is one of the big bugaboos here and why I started this podcast. The White House, of course, they continue to blame Trump. I don't know if you've heard enough of the podcast to know that there are basically 5 plays that Democrats run. Only 5. They've got a very short playbook. Andy Reid has a much longer playbook.
And that's why he's more successful.
They've only got 5. Let's see if I can go over them real quick. They'll only have 5 answers to things. It's racist, number 1. Number 2 is somebody has something that you don't have, and that's not fair.
Entitlement.
Yeah. Yep. Number 3 is global warming, the environment. So, blame it on
climate
global
change,
warming.
number
sure.
1 priority.
Number 4 is blame Trump. It's his fault.
Always good go-to.
And number 5 is there's nothing to see here.
Absolutely.
There's nothing.
There never is.
So which play are they going to run here with Karine here, Kurt?
Administration, which largely just tried to build a wall, an ineffective wall, along the border and couldn't even finish that in 4 years.
Blame Trump.
We're certainly doing a lot more to secure the border and could be doing even more if Republicans would stop their obstruction. That's it. I'm going to just take one
time out here. Okay, stop that clip. Republicans and their obstruction. Democrats have majorities in the Senate, the House, and they have the White House. Republicans can't stop them if they wanted to stop them. Okay.
Right.
Debate over the policy that seems okay when Biden does it and human trafficking when Republican governors do it.
Right.
Roll the clip.
This is apparently, he said it was essentially no different than what the federal government has done in sending, flights in the middle of the night. That's the way he's characterized it. Taking migrants to various different states. Do you have a response to that?
So we are offering solutions. That's what the Biden-Harris administration has been doing since day one, including on the first day putting forth a comprehensive immigration reform to deal with this issue.
Okay, so let's stop it there because I think the grown-ups at some point have to come into the room.
Right.
And I get that the Democrats have a way they want to deal with it, Republicans have a way they want to deal with it, and it's the chicken and the egg, which one comes first. Because Republicans want that border sealed before they'll deal with any of the millions who are already here.
Absolutely.
Democrats want to deal with the millions that are here and then do the border wall. So therein lies the problem. I mean, that's the conflict between Republicans and Democrats. Where are you on it?
Absolutely, to secure it first, because it doesn't make any sense to take care of the problem that's already here if the problem is constantly growing and growing and growing. And I'd like to mention how the Washington, D.C. mayor, I can't forget her, I can't remember
Muriel
her name
Bowser.
for the life. Yes, thank you. When they first had illegals showing up in Washington, D.C., her knee-jerk reaction was, we need to get the National Guard involved.
Yeah.
That request was denied. But if your knee-jerk reaction was, we need to get the National Guard involved with just a few hundred, all right, why don't we have that same mentality to the 2 million that crossed in a fiscal year? Why not have the same mentality there? Because we have to secure it because this isn't going to stop. We know that China produces and manufactures fentanyl and then feeds that to cartels. Cartels then, with not having a border wall, we are funding and keeping cartels alive down there at the border because people pay cartels, coyotes. They'll give them a sum of money as like a rite of passage. All right, you gave us money, you can run to the border because it's not secure. The cartels are making money by flooding fentanyl and other illegal substances past our border. They're making money there. With guns, there is plenty of illegal gun distribution down there because in order to have that tight seal grip on the border that they run, they got to have guns to keep that territory. We are single-handedly funding the cartels down there by not having a secure border, and that's not even getting into the illegals that are coming here. So is that another problem that we really want to have on us while we have all these other ones? Absolutely not. You tell me.
Well, and she talked about the border wall, that Trump couldn't get it done in 4 years. You know, the material for the wall is still down in Texas.
Right.
And Governor Abbott went to the federal government and said, can we use that stuff?
Right.
We'll build our own wall. We'll build it within the Texas border, and we'll solve our own problem. And the federal government said, no, you can't have it. You can't buy it. It's just going to sit there and rust.
Right, exactly.
Nothing to see here. See, that's the play that they run. So the problem will continue until you get some leadership on it. And
Absolutely.
Nature abhors a vacuum. You probably heard that before. Right now we have a leadership vacuum.
Yeah,
there is no leader in the White House right now.
Absolutely.
Trump, love him or hate him, and I know a lot. There's a lot on both sides, right? He's a polarizing figure, but he was a leader.
Right, absolutely.
He was a leader.
He had a game plan, and he united people behind that game plan. And it was like, all right, we're going to get something, and we're going to take care of it. And I think it's cool, though, in this case, with this vacuum that has been created, is governors stepping up to the plate.
Right.
I feel like a lot of people across the United States are realizing just how much power other governments and other people can have that are not the president. I feel like every time election year rolls around, everybody's focused on what's happening in Washington, D.C., the congressman and the president, which, I mean, you should pay a great deal of attention to that. Obviously, look what's happening now. But I don't think people take a lot of time to invest in their own state governments, local governments, school boards. Those positions hold power, too, and we're seeing that in Governors Abbott and in Governors DeSantis, and the failure of so in governors like Newsom. You know,
who's going to run for president in 2024?
Oh, absolutely.
If Biden doesn't, that's his caveat now.
They're grooming him right now for it.
Well, he was at the White House measuring for drapes while Biden was out of town.
He was going through the medicine cabinet, seeing if Biden had the same hair gel that he's got.
Biden's got some stuff in his medicine cabinet. I'm not sure it's hair gel. But, you know, we talk a lot on the podcast about the federal system, about how the framers designed our federal government.
Right.
And it's been turned totally on its head. So now, I mean, we have confiscatory tax rates. We have 80,000 pages of tax regulations enforced by the IRS. And basically, the Democrats will say, well, trickle-down economics doesn't work. I say, let's establish a price for running a federal government, get the hell out of everything you should not be in, and let's come up with a flat tax that covers the cost of the government. Stop using our federal government as a way to construct social change, which is what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And let's move back to a federal system. And maybe we're seeing some of that with these 50 state governors that have to do more because there is no leadership coming from the White House.
Right, absolutely.
All right. So before we move on to the White House and the administration hit and misses, notice I said hit and misses. There's one thing I think they did okay in the last week, and the rest of it's a series of misses. We want to thank Royal Roofing and Solar. They're another one of our sponsors, Austin Watterson. Now, you know, the left will tell you that, you know, we got to save the planet. You got to save the planet. You got to buy an electric car. You got to plug in your electric car. And, of course, you're plugging it into a grid that is powered by coal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's, you know, so fossil fuels are still part of it.
Common
And
sense.
these electric cars that they're talking about, and, you know, we saw Biden driving one around. I guess we're going to see that clip in a little bit. But what you can do, okay, if you own a home, okay, and I do, you have utility. You have Evergy is what we have in Missouri. That's our utility company.
Right.
You're essentially renting your utilities from Evergy and hoping to God they stay on. I mean, the infrastructure in my neighborhood is so bad that, you know, if a strong wind blows, we're going to lose power.
Really?
So, and I've talked to some people about this because what they're doing at Royal Roofing and Solar is they're using the tax credits that the government's giving us. Hell, they're going to give us free money. Let's take their free money, okay? Let's get solar going at our house so that we're buying our utility instead of renting our utility. And I talked to a guy who's as conservative as you are, good friend of mine, good Republican who owns a business in Blue Springs, and he's telling me that, and I noticed his building has solar on both sides of the roof, they're generating enough power that they don't have an electric bill. Now that makes sense. Sell me on that. Sell me on the benefit of it. And if you can sell me that I'm not going to get an electric bill anymore, after investing this into my property, I'm buying my utility, not renting it anymore.
Right.
So for premium quality roofs and solar solutions, Austin Watterson is your guy at Royal Roofing and Solar. And Austin is going to be with us at the live event on October 6th, and he can explain it to you. And when he came in and when we talked to him about coming on board the podcast, he was talking about how the people who are his customers who are buying this are very conservative people because they want to fire their energy company.
Right.
And they're generating enough with these solar panels to get rid of their electric bill in most cases, or definitely minimize it to very little. And that's what has me very interested in it. It's Royal Roofing and Solar, Royal Contracting Solutions. Austin and his team, they're into a lot of things. In fact, they did my roof, and they've also, they look at kitchen remodelings, basement remodelings, remodeling in your house. They're great guys in Cass County, Missouri. Kurt, what's their phone number? I can't read it from here.
816-540-7057. That's 816-540-7057. Make sure to come out to our live event in a couple weeks and come meet Austin.
You bet.
I'm gonna be
Austin's a
there.
great guy. And Kurt does a great job of reading phone numbers, don't you think?
I was going to say, that is very commercial-esque, infomercial.
816-540-7057.
Don't puke. Puking is bad. That's you don't know what that is. I mean, you probably know what it is in terms of drinking too much and then losing your cookies. I'm talking about it in terms of radio. Now, when I got into radio in the late 70s and 80s, I was doing top 40 radio before I did country.
Right.
Everybody on the radio got to talk like this.
It's that.
And now we call that puking, and it's really frowned on. On the radio, they want you to be more your natural self, and not this guy who sounds like he's about to puke.
Yeah.
That's where puking comes from. So, Kurt, don't be a puker.
Okay.
All right. So, in the tradition of giving credit where credit is due, and, we started this podcast on the day Joe Biden was inaugurated. I wanted to take him at face value. We started on January 20th, 2021. I wanted to take him at face value. I wanted some of the things he said to be true, that he was there to unite the country, because let's face it, Donald Trump's an asshole. Would you give me that?
I would say it's a lot of people are very sensitive to how he articulates and the words he uses.
I mean, I loved everything he did. I loved 99% of what he did as president.
People do not like his personality.
Style.
I would say, it's the
I
charisma
can't tell you
that's there.
How many times on the air on KFKF I said, for the love of God, take his phone away from him and lock it somewhere. Okay? If all we had to deal with was what he did and his policies, he would have been reelected in a landslide.
Right.
But because he's an asshole, and they sold that really hard on the middle of the country, and Joe Biden was a useful fool in this. Basically, it's like, Joey, sit in the basement, don't make any waves, and we're going to make you president.
Yep.
Okay. So, so Joe Biden goes out there and says, I'm going to reunite the country. I'm going to heal the country. We're just going to move forward and just give me a shot, guys. I'm just Joey B. Just give me a shot.
Right.
And, if we don't agree, we can work it out. And then, of course, we know that he went to work immediately undoing everything that Donald Trump did. If Donald Trump said the sky was blue, he would have had an executive order saying it's orange.
Right.
That's just
spot on.
That's the way he did
executive order, very
yeah, well,
poignant,
that's what
right?
a lot of this has been as executive.
Also, orange, very funny.
Well, that was like
that was pretty good for off the cuff. Did you mean to do that, Dale?
Probably not, but when you've done it this long, and you have talent that's just like pouring from your pores.
You're past the puking phase, and you're just professional at this point. Like it flows naturally.
I liked you for a second or two, but now you're getting on my nerves. Just kidding. Okay, so he had his big moonshot for cancer. Now let's say in an alternate universe, he gives that speech on January 20th, 2021. He doesn't undo the things that Trump did that were working, like the pipeline project that was coming, being energy independent instead of dependent, not screwing with the border and letting 2 million people come.
All right, so this alternate universe is better off than we are.
The alternate universe. Okay, so he comes out and he says, my kid Bo died of cancer, and I'm going to make cancer a priority in my administration, and we're going to work on it, and our goal is to bring down cancer deaths by 25%. Okay, we'd have been on board with that because nobody likes cancer. Right. Cancer's a winner.
Exactly.
Okay, so he finally does that last week, and I gave him credit for it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of other shit that he's done that we don't like.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, so I gave him credit for that. I give him credit on this. We were about to have a rail strike in this country, okay? In the great tradition of Teddy Roosevelt and Harry Truman, the administration, I don't know who did it. I doubt Joe Biden did it, but the administration got the parties together, and we averted a rail strike. That's a good thing, because as bad as things are, it could have been worse. You don't think it could have been worse?
I thought we were going to play a clip. I'm sorry. I thought we were going to play a clip.
Kurt, play the clip.
There's no clip.
I've left him speak. Oh, okay, there's no clip.
Well, with that, when it comes to, we kind of touched on this a little bit. I'm not too educated on the topic of what happened with the rail strike. I read up on it. And when I first read it, I was like, well, this just seems like a bunch of unions that, are trying to kick us while we're down, where, hey, we know the economy's bad and everything, and if you don't raise our paychecks a bit, we're just going to go on strike and say, to hell with everybody. But I understand there's more details when it comes to that. So,
well, let's I'm a big historian. I love history.
Right.
I love American history. Okay, so we had a coal strike around the turn of the century, from the 19th century to the 20th century. Teddy Roosevelt was president, and he brought together the unions, the coal unions, and the operators. And he said, okay, you represent the unions, you represent the companies, I represent the United States. Okay, and our people are going to freeze to death if we don't do something about this. And he wouldn't let them out of the room until they hammered out a deal. Now, there was a similar deal when Truman was president where there was a rail strike, I think, another rail strike, and he basically called them all together into the Oval Office, and they hammered it out. Now, I don't know what happened here, but what I do know is there was not a rail strike. And if you think it's bad now, and it is bad,
right,
it could have been a hell of a lot worse.
I do know a comment that he said was, oh, we would have had a real economic crisis. And I just kind of have to laugh at a comment like that saying, oh, we would have had a real economic crisis if this would have happened, as if, like, the situation already isn't bad and we're not in our own real economic crisis.
Right.
So diverting to that and saying, oh, look what I did. This didn't happen.
We're definitely in a big crisis right now. But if the strike had gone forward, it could have caused economic chaos even worse. The rails serve oil refineries. They're tied to gas prices and farmers carrying crops and fertilizer. The supply of cars and trucks, already at high prices because of the computer chip shortage, could have been disrupted there. 3/4 of new vehicles are shipped by rail. The Association of American Railroads had estimated that the economic impact of a nationwide railroad strike could top $2 billion a day.
Also, don't forget about all that coal, all that good old coal. That gets
you see those?
rails.
Yeah, I love that. We had that meme on the Facebook page at one point. It's basically a long line of coal train cars.
Yep.
It's fueling electric cars.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's exactly what you're doing. So anyway, it's a good thing that we didn't have a rail strike. It's a good thing that the administration is focusing on cutting cancer deaths by 25%. The rest of what he's done, complete train wreck.
Right.
Yeah. So
see, there we go. Did you hear that? Another one. Another train wreck.
A miss, okay, and there are misses here coming. Joey's speech in Michigan, where he committed to pay for 500,000 EV charging stations to coincide with his ridiculous plan to move to 100% EVs. To a point you just made, you're basically getting the materials for these EVs in third world countries.
Right.
You're using,
child labor, a lot of times, slave labor.
Exploiting the planet, making a lot bigger mess of this planet than oil and gas and all that. So, I mean, where I come from is I'm an all-in guy. Let's get it all in. Let's get all the energy in and let the market decide which one emerges. Don't come in and put your finger on the scale as the government and say, this is what we said because we said so.
Right. Need a more laissez-faire mentality when it comes to that. Let the businesses, they're going to build themselves up. And whichever one is going to be successful, that's going to be a good indicator of which one is going to be leading for the future.
100% virtue signaling. Speaking of which, Joey B. driving a Cadillac. Very slowly.
Those electric vehicles are pretty gnarly, though.
They're kind of cool.
Come to the White House, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Hop in, man.
I'm pleased to announce we're approving funding for the first 35 states, including Michigan, to build their own electric charging infrastructure throughout their states.
Stop the tape just a second there. I want to say something. When he says 35, what did he say, 35,000?
35 states.
35 states with charging stations. You are plugging those cars into a grid that is fueled by coal. Keep that in mind. It's fueled by coal.
Yep.
Resume.
And y'all are going to be part of a network of 500,000 charging stations.
Again, connected to coal.
500,000 throughout the country.
He's happy he got through that number.
There's your suck up to the unions. All right. Is that enough of that?
He's happy he got through that number and he said it right, so he kept repeating 500K.
So let's move on to Sunday night because Scott Pelley from CBS is going to interview him. The media is trying to prop up this administration. I mean, they are. There's no question about that. And it's also very apparent to me that Scott Pelley went into the White House with certain rules. You're not allowed to ask about immigration or the border.
Right, right.
And you sure as hell can't ask about Hunter Biden.
Yep.
Who was also in the news last week. And Hunter Biden is one thing. I mean, if you were my kid and you were a screw up and all that, and I was president of the United States, that's one thing. But if you're out there and you're doing all these deals and you're kicking up money to the big guy, and the big guy turns out to be me, that's problematic.
Well, what's problematic about what Hunter's done is his actions have most certainly been insider trading in a lot of extent. How do you think he funds this deplorable lifestyle? And it has also been threats against our national security. I will say, do you remember like a month ago or 2 months ago when the United States, we just sent 100 million barrels of oil over to China?
Right.
Yeah. And it was just kind of like, all right.
Why did we do that?
Well, you want to know? This is what's interesting. The company they sent it to is Sinopec. And now what's interesting about this is that Hunter Biden actually holds assets with that company. So you mean to tell me, out of all the companies that are in China, the one you send 100 million barrels of oil to while we're in our own gas crisis just so happens to be a company that Hunter Biden has assets and has some sort of financial gain with them? And his lawyers came out in 2021 and said that, Hunter Biden doesn't have ties with this company anymore. But to this day, Chinese record shows no change that he ever left. That is insider trading to help, well, maybe not insider trading specifically, but he is profiting off of his father being the president of the United States. Not to mention how his dad in the 80s, way back in the day, because gosh, this guy just can't seem to get out of the spotlight, the political spotlight. That's going to be another rabbit hole. But in the 80s, Biden was big on cutting down on crime. There are so many sound bits out there where it's talking about, we have to get these violent thugs.
The 94 crime bill. I mean, he was behind it.
Exactly. And you mean to tell me you were going to be responsible for incarcerating so many people in the United States for having any amount of cocaine on them or any amount of any sort of drug. But then when we have hard evidence of video footage, photographic evidence, text messages, correspondence of these deals being made, all of a sudden it's, my son beat an addiction, and he wrote a book about it. That's all you have to say on that. That's all you have to say on that. He said that in the 60 Minutes interview. He's like, he had an addiction, and he wrote a book about it. Yeah. Oh, well, great. Fantastic. Good for him.
They also, like we said, did not mention anything about the 2.1 million illegals coming across the border. I just wonder if for a second in my alternate universe again.
Right, the better one.
If Hunter's last name was Trump, would the media care?
And we're all on the same page there. Absolutely. If they can run for months years with a story like Trump and Russian collusion, something that was literally fugazi. If they can run for years with a story like that, the media wishes with every fiber of their being that Donald Trump Jr. is everything that Hunter Biden is. But he's not.
By the way, I know Kurt's itching to get to these clips, but one other little rabbit hole to go down. Kurt put this up on our Facebook page, Dale Carter's America, and I thought it was so spot on. It was George Takei. Now, I'm a Star Trek fan. I mean, don't hate me, but I'm a Star Trek geek. George Takei is Lieutenant Sulu on the Star Trek deal, and he's very, very liberal. And, he said something to the effect, Kurt, remind me what he said, something about, you can't trust election deniers, yada, yada, yada.
Pull it up right now.
Okay.
Yeah. I love that. Here's a simple rule. Never elect any election deniers into positions that oversee our elections. That's George Takei. And then Kurt found, or somebody found, George Takei after Donald Trump won the election. He says, the CIA assessment concludes that Russians interfered with our elections with the margins so close, the result is illegitimate. Same guy.
I'm having a full circle moment because I've seen this idiot's tweets, George Takei, and I've always wondered.
Sulu.
I was like, why is this guy got a blue check mark? Why is this guy prominent? And so now I'm not a Trekkie, but now it makes
Don't get
full
Dale
sense.
started on that.
We could do a whole podcast on my Star Trek thing that goes all the way back to 1968, before you were a gleam and whoever your father's
I wouldn't be able to
eyes.
contribute in that conversation.
Yeah.
Don't
okay.
know.
So to the actual 60 Minutes interview with Scott Pelley, and if I saw a clip with Bill Clinton yesterday, which just hit the nail on the head. He says Democrats have to say the right things, not do the right things.
Right.
We have to say the right things. And if Scott Pelley had asked Bill Clinton this question, it would have been something like, I feel your pain.
Yeah.
Joe Biden can't get there. As much as they're trying to get him there, he can't get there. Play the clip.
Mr. President, as you know, last Tuesday, the annual inflation rate came in at 8.3%. The stock market nosedived. People are shocked by their grocery bills. What can you do better and faster?
Well, first of all, let's put this in perspective. Inflation rate month to month was just an inch, hardly at all.
You're not arguing that 8.3 is good news.
No, I'm not saying it's good news, but it was 8.2 or 8.2 before. I mean, it's not. Maybe I can make it sound like all of a sudden, my God, it went to 8.2%.
Well, stop the tape. Stop the tape. Stop the tape. Because when Donald Trump was president, it was 1.2%. It's 8.3% now.
No, all right. But
Only went up an inch,
It took
though.
2 years. It took 2 years to shoot up, but it didn't shoot up in a day. It just took 2 years of his presidency.
And he's had that ridiculous statement in July because it didn't go up month to month.
Oh,
that
it's 0%.
inflation is 0%.
Right.
And he stood by it, even after they tried to walk it back from the White House.
It just put the shovel down. But
yeah. I mean, inflation that's the number one thing that people are going to vote on.
Absolutely.
The midterm in 7 weeks from right now.
Absolutely.
That's the number one thing they're going to vote on. And this is how the president dealt with it on 60 Minutes, which is still like one of the most viewed shows of the week.
Yeah.
Was there more on this clip other than Scott Pelley's face that you froze? You
like that?
You got to get that on the YouTube because he's like, I mean, that face basically says Biden just farted and he smelled it.
There was, I'm pretty sure there was one clip in that interview where it's like he was talking about Biden's age and he's like, oh, well, what do you say to people that say you're not fit for the job? And he's like, watch me. And he's like, the host, like, it was so obvious he was trying to hold back a chuckle, and he's like, which leads me to my next question. We don't have that clip, but it was great.
Well,
let's go see the rest of this.
Yeah, go to the rest of it.
Inflation rate, Mr. President, in 40 years.
I got that. But that's what we are. We're in a position where
You can
for
tell
the
when
last
he's
several
leaning
months
into.
it hasn't spiked. It is just barely. It's
just
basically
barely.
even.
It's just barely
And in the
inching up
meantime,
from its
we
40-year
created all
record
these
high.
jobs and prices have-
don't get me
have
started
gone
on
up,
that
but
shit.
they've come
I would
down
like
for
to say,
energy.
throughout this interview, I feel like Biden is really starting to work on his Clint Eastwood impression. He's talking low and all grumbled and man.
Get off my lawn.
He keeps taking credit for this 10 million jobs and all that. He did not create. First of all, government does not create jobs. The private sector creates jobs. The worst thing that government can do is get in the way. Okay, so the jobs that are coming back from a pandemic where we shut the economy down.
The most self-inflicted economic shutdown this country's ever seen.
Self-inflicted is what the last 2 years have been. Self-inflicted is where we are. So with all of this great record, this wonderful record of accomplishment, Mr. President, because normally when a president wins their first term, it's assumed they're going to run for re-election, right?
Right.
Mr. President, are you going to run for re-election?
Sir, are you committed to running again, or are there certain conditions that have to be right?
Look, if I were to say to you, I'm running again, all of a sudden a whole range of things come into play that I have requirements I have to change and move and do.
In terms of election laws?
In terms of election laws. And it's much too early to make that kind of decision. I'm a great respecter of fate. And so what I'm doing is I'm doing my job. I'm going to do that job. And within the time frame that makes sense after this next election cycle here, going into next year, make a judgment of what to do.
You say that it's much too early to make that decision. I take it the decision has not been made in your own head.
Look, my intention, as I said to begin with, is that I would run again. But it's just an intention. But is it a firm decision that I run again? That remains to be seen.
Yeah. Somewhere in California, Gavin Newsom is printing up T-shirts and signs and ball caps.
Yeah, they're most certainly going to groom him to take that position. And what's funny to me is that obviously Joe Biden has completely lost his rocker. He has gone to the wind. He is not there because a lot of that can be chalked up to his age, right? And as we know, Queen Elizabeth just passed away, and so they the guys over there, not us. We fought a war, so I didn't have to say we. But they got a new king over there. And what is crazy, he is the oldest king, the oldest person to be put into that position of monarchy throughout England's history. And he is still 6 years younger than Joe Biden. The oldest person. Think about how long England has had this monarchy.
Yeah.
And he is the oldest and still 6 years younger than Biden. That should be your answer right there for not running again.
That's Ethan Allen, ladies and gentlemen, guest on the podcast this week.
We pull no punches.
Before we jump to the kicker, if you will, we again want to thank Bob Watson, longtime supporter of what we're doing here on this podcast. Great guy. If you ever get a chance to talk to him.
Great guy.
The best guy.
The best.
Bob will be there October 6th at Funhouse Pizza on 7 Highway in Blue Springs. Says he's going to bring a bunch of buddies with him who think just exactly the way that we do. And on top of that, he's an excellent State Farm agent. 5 decades he's been insuring people like me. In fact, Ethan, he insured my kids. And to the extent that he's got gray hair, my kids probably helped him get that gray hair.
I don't doubt it.
Just because, they
kids
were boys.
These days. What are you
I had
do
4
with them?
boys.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You were probably a saint. My 4 were not.
My mom would beg to differ, but hey, there's nothing wrong with being an honorary little boy.
As we say about Bob, when the shit hits the fan, you need a guy you can talk to. And that's Bob Watson, State Farm agent, 229-7878, 816-229-7878. He'll insure your home, your life, your car, business insurance.
What are you doing reading the number? I thought we were going to save that for Kurt. We just
I'm
said
sorry, Kurt.
816-229-7878. There we go.
There we go.
All right, to the end here. It's the death of humor in this country. Now, a couple of things on this. The Queen died, and they were having the funeral and all that, and I'm on KFKF, and I'm doing a segment at 6:45.
Wait, that's you?
That is me. That same guy.
All right, I thought you sounded familiar. I thought.
So, we had this little comedy bit about King Charles and the size of his fingers. Like sausages, like big sausages.
That's an
or
understatement.
Yeah. And then we've got a little song parody that I played out of it, set to King Tut. Mm-hmm. You know that song? I know you're so young. Yeah, King Tut. The old Steve Martin song.
All that came to mind was Walk Like an Egyptian.
Yeah, well, that's not it. So we changed it to King Chuck. Okay. Well, this lady calls me afterwards, and she goes, that was terrible. I mean, the Queen's funeral's going on right now, and you're making fun of this guy. Okay, so she doesn't leave it there. She calls the complaint line at the radio station.
What do you have to do in your day?
Yeah. So she calls the complaint line. She goes, I can't believe he did this, blah, 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 blah. Not realizing, of course, that I'm the program director at KFKF. So the complaints all come to me. So this morning, I basically repackaged that call,
right,
and I played it on the air. And then I played King Chuck again. Because that's just kind of how we handle stuff like that.
I love that.
But we're in a woke society now where, humor comes at the expense of someone.
Right.
King Charles got the big floppy ears. He's got big sausage fingers. He's got a wife that looks like a horse.
Goofy looking guy.
Exactly. So it comes at his expense. Humor comes at expense. And trust me, on my show, enough of it comes at my expense. I get that.
Right. I would say, all right, so I may not be informed on the King Tut song and everything about that, but one of my favorite comedians is Don Rickles. And Don Rickles killed at that all the time. Mr. Warmth.
Yeah.
He was the greatest at, making fun of somebody, but he always ended every one of his roasts or every one of his, stand-ups along the lines of, look, this is what's great about this country. We can pick and pull and we can make fun of each other. And I feel like that's a lot of way people find harmony in it, is just like, hey, all right. We like each other and make fun. That's how we grow together.
By the way, if you were just watching on the YouTube version of the podcast, which is why you should watch on YouTube,
absolutely.
Kurt just put up a picture of Prince Charles's sausage-like fingers. Man, it made me hungry for lunch. I need a little Polish sausage going on.
Right. I got one more.
Where's the bratwurst? Yeah, so
you got one more?
Oh, it's tiny.
He's got those German connections, man.
So, as we were talking about the death of humor in this country, Caitlyn Jenner, obviously, a very conservative. Bruce Jenner, very conservative, but it's decided that he's a woman. Go with God. Be who you are. Just don't force me down that rabbit hole.
Don't be putting it in children's books.
Exactly.
And don't.
So, I guess the folks at South Park They put out a cartoon version, and people have their hair on fire about how Kurt showed.
Talk about my transition.
You're not transitioning, are you?
Right. God, no, man.
Okay.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
I tell you, I'm so glad I'm a guy.
God-fearing man over here.
I've got at least 42 reasons I'm glad I'm a guy.
Yeah.
Childbirth is way up there.
Yeah. I'm not gonna take that one for the team. I'll be there for support.
There you go.
For support.
Ethan Allen, where's your podcast again?
You can find my podcast on YouTube at Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys. You can also find us on Facebook under the same name and on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And I would like to say, if you're listening to Dale Carter's America, you're obviously on the right track. So keep going down that track. Be strong. Be a Green Mountain Boy. Follow, subscribe today. Thank you for having me on the show, Dale.
An honor
really
to have you here. Thank you for being with us today. And with that, and laughter being the best medicine for this country, this is Dale Carter's America.
The views expressed on Dale Carter's America are Dale's and Kurt Wheeler's. They do not necessarily reflect the views of KFKF or Steel City Media. Comments can be sent to DaleCartersAmerica@gmail.com. Check back for weekly episodes. Subscribe, spread the word, and give us a 5-star review. Thanks for being a part of Dale Carter's America.